Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we are strapping ourselves into the time machine, not just to watch the rise of farming, but to witness the invention of modern ideology itself.
That's a great way to put it.
We're heading back to the crucible of the Neolithic Revolution, roughly 12,000 to 5,300 BCE. When we think about this era, we usually focus on the economic stuff, the birth of agriculture, stored grain, sedentary life.
And that it kind of misses the real revolution.
Right.
The Neolithic wasn't just an economic shift. It was a profound ideological transformation. It was the moment human society outgrew its Paleolithic operating system. I mean, you just can't run a complex agricultural settlement of thousands of people, most of whom are not related, with the same social rules that worked for a small family band of 50 hunter-gatherers.
The scale just breaks everything.
But it fundamentally changes the requirements for social cohesion. Everything has to be re-engineered.
So that old way of thinking where spiritual and political authority was spread out, it was temporary, the spiritual life was in local nature spirits, the political life was in whoever was best for the job right now, that just couldn't handle it.
Couldn't handle the complexity of fixed communities, accumulated surplus, and the absolute need for highly coordinated collective action.
So our mission today is to unpack the sources and show you how this massive, unprecedented increase in complexity provided the literal selective pressure necessary for the emergence of centralized divine authority. The high God concept, in essence, was invented because society needed a management tool.
The key concept we're tracking here is transposition. Think of it like a system upgrade.
Okay.
Paleolithic agencies, both political and spiritual, they were temporary, they were facultative, meaning they only kicked in when needed, and they were diffused throughout the group. But the Neolithic demanded that these agencies be transposed. They had to become permanent, institutionalized, and centralized.
Right, because if you need a huge irrigation system dug and maintained over, say, a decade,
you can't rely on the ablest person maybe feeling like showing up that day. You need a permanent system, a specialized manager, and a mechanism of accountability that goes way beyond personal relationships.
and this is so important, we need to look beyond those old, simple, linear models.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, ones that suggest religion just went from, animism to polytheism to monotheism in this neat little staircase.
That's just not how it worked.
The research strongly suggests centralized divinity was, in fact, a functional adaptation. It was necessary for social survival. It was a piece of governance technology.
And that function is perfectly encapsulated in the defining phenomenon of this era.
Henotheism.
Henotheism. Okay, define that for us.
It's a concept that often gets overlooked, but it's the perfect bridge. Henotheism is the belief in one supreme deity, often a sky father or cosmic regulator, but without denying the existence of other, subordinate gained spirits or local deities.
This is not pure monotheism. It's like having a CEO god with a bunch of middle manager deities. Exactly. And why is this so important? Because it served as the ideological tool for these early, expanding, stratified societies. It let a central elite unify disparate tribes or villages under one supreme banner, the god who reigns over all, while still allowing local traditions and local priests to keep functioning under that umbrella. It was a tool of unification that didn't demand you throw away everything you believed yesterday.
Which makes political absorption much, much smoother.
Infinitely smoother.
Okay, so let's unpack this transposition. You said it happened in lockstep across both the political and spiritual worlds. How did authority figures go from being temporary leaders to, permanent rulers? And how did the spirit of the local river become an official, all-seeing god?
We start with the basic unit of power. In the Paleolithic, the baseline was egalitarian, or more accurately, what scholars call achieved egalitarianism.
Achieved, meaning you had to earn it.
You earned it every day. Power was gained through personal prestige. You were the strongest hunter, the wisest elder, the best navigator. But crucially, that authority was facultative.
Situational.
It was purely situational and only exercised when absolutely necessary.
So if a group needs to cross a dangerous river, the person who's the best swimmer leads. But once you're on the other side,
their leadership dissolves instantly. They're back to being just another member of the group. Leadership was a temporary service, not a permanent status.
Okay, so that's the baseline. Now, the Neolithic shift.
Now, this situational authority gets transposed into the institution of the chief, the big man, the head man. Leadership is no longer situational. It's a formal, permanent position.
A job title.
A job title with responsibilities. And this new structure was essential for coordinating multi-year projects like clearing forests or managing seed storage. And here's the critical economic piece. These leaders began to appropriate and manage the newly generated surplus resources.
And that surplus, that stored grain, those penned-up animals, that's the material genesis of all the social stratification we see today, isn't it?
It is the absolute material foundation. The ability to accumulate surplus meant that power could now be decoupled from constant personal achievement.
Right. It's not about what you did today. It's about what your fathers stored up yesterday.
Precisely. Power could be secured and passed down through lineage, creating hereditary power structures and the first recognizable elite classes. This was a profound departure. Power moved from being based on personal skill to being based on lineage, accumulated wealth, and control over critical resources.
Okay, that makes sense structurally. But where do we see the physical proof of this? I mean, how do we know surplus created permanent inherited power?
We see it in the early necropolises,
Yeah.
the burials. Take the example of the Varna Chalcolithic necropolis in modern Bulgaria, dating to the 5th millennium BCE.
I've heard of this. The gold is incredible.
It's staggering, and it shows unprecedented social division. Some graves are just filled with lavish amounts of gold, copper tools, elaborate ritual items, signs of enormous accumulated wealth, and then others have virtually nothing.
And there's one grave in particular, right? The king's grave.
That's the one. It was exceptionally rich, suggesting the person buried there had extraordinary status and control over resources that was just unimaginable a few generations prior.
So Varna isn't just a rich burial. It's physical evidence that a person's political status was now permanent and likely hereditary based on control of wealth, not just the ability to hunt.
Exactly. And once that power became tied to fixed land and stored wealth, the social contract completely changed.
How so?
Well, in the Paleolithic, if you disagreed with your leader, what did you do?
You left, you packed up and joined another band.
Exactly. The dispersal cost was relatively low. But in the Neolithic, you're stuck. You're locked in.
You've got your fields, your house, the irrigation ditch your grandfather helped dig.
You've invested generations of labor in that specific plot of land. The cost of leaving, abandoning your stores, your shelter, your community is extremely high. So that old egalitarian impulse, what scholars call the coalition to suppress dominance, it just gets overpowered by the necessity of staying put and accepting a structured leadership.
So power becomes tied to territory.
Inseparably tied to territorial control and the capacity for administrative coercion. We start seeing the need for defense walls, specialized guards, enforcement mechanisms to ensure compliance and order.
So the stability of farming communities demanded permanent, inherited authority backed by, well, force. Okay, let's trace that parallel shift in the spiritual world, from the shaman to the priest.
The spiritual transposition mirrors the political one perfectly. In the Paleolithic, spiritual agency was personal and diffused, mediated by the shaman.
And the shaman was, what, a part-time job?
Often, yes. They derived their authority from personal vision, ecstatic experiences, a direct connection to the spirit world. Their power was achieved, just like the political leader, it came from within.
Okay, so the Neolithic shift moves that power.
It moves to the priest or priestess class, an organized, full-time, specialized clergy. And here's the key. They did not derive their authority from personal vision. They derived it from their position in a formal cult or institution. It's bureaucratic. They were permanent, specialized, and dedicated to managing permanent sacred sites. They didn't just access the sacred, they controlled access to the sacred.
And this consolidation also applied to the spirits themselves. The Paleolithic world was, you said, filled with animism.
Countless localized spirits. The spirit of that specific river bend, the spirit protecting that stand of trees, it was fragmented.
And that doesn't work for a big integrated community.
It's structurally incompatible. If you need to coordinate resources across a broad territory, you can't have 1,000 different competing local spirits. The sources show those spirits were consolidated into a pantheon of powerful, specialized, and territorial deities.
So instead of a spirit for every stream, you get one universal rain god.
A universal rain god who rules all weather, or a universal fertility goddess responsible for all crops. This consolidation focused worship on predictable agricultural cycles, which fundamentally validated the new sedentary lifestyle.
And you mentioned ancestor worship becoming crucial here. Why now?
Because it was tied directly to those permanent land plots. If you own the land, you honor the ancestors who cleared it, who irrigated it, who cultivated it. This practice reinforced the growing patrilineal control over the most valuable resource, the land itself, and it provided deep historical and spiritual legitimacy for the chief's ruling family line.
And the most I guess, visually arresting proof of all this centralization is in the architecture. It's not a sacred grove anymore. It's a sacred building.
Absolutely. The sacred focus moves from natural sites like caves or springs to temples and sanctuaries, permanent, massive centers. These were the monumental, built religious institutions, megaliths, ziggurats. These required massive communal labor,
And that labor had to be organized by someone.
organized and legitimized by the new political spiritual elite. This cemented the fusion of political and spiritual power. It often resulted in the chief or king formally taking on the role of chief priest, which formalized his control over both material resource allocation and cosmological understanding,
So the religious hierarchy was literally built on the backs of the community.
serving the needs of the emerging ruling class. It's all right there in the stones.
Okay, so we have new permanent societies and new permanent leaders. But now we hit a huge challenge, the crisis of scale. The community is too big for everyone to know everyone else. The sources suggest the high God concept solved a problem that was fundamentally about human management, not just theology.
What's fascinating here is that the emerging high god wasn't primarily a theological revelation. It was a sophisticated governance technology designed specifically to solve problems related to the new size and density of Neolithic life.
Okay, let's start with that term you used earlier, scalar stress. Define that for us in detail. What could rapid population growth actually break in the social contract?
Scalar stress is the difficulty of maintaining trust and cooperation when a community grows beyond the Dunbar number, that cognitive limit on stable social relationships, around 150 people. In a small hunter-gatherer group, cooperation is managed through personal reputation and face-to-face reciprocity.
Right, if I cheat you, everyone knows about it by sundown.
Exactly. The social pressure is immediate and pervasive. Gossip works. But when your community expands to hundreds or thousands, those local mechanisms fail. You can't rely on reciprocal altruism anymore. You can't trust the farmer on the far side of the valley if you don't know him personally. The system is now dealing with widespread non-kin interaction.
And this is where the collective action problem explodes. If everyone is supposed to spend 2 days a month maintaining the communal irrigation ditch, how do you stop free riders? People who benefit from the water but skip the hard labor.
This is the core adaptive pressure. And the Neolithic solution was the development of doctrinal religions with professional priesthoods and explicit shared moral codes that went beyond family and clan. Religion in this context functioned as a club good. It enforced standardized behavioral norms across these essential non-kin groups, which facilitated those big public good investments.
But wait, I have to challenge that a bit. Couldn't the chief have just used more guards? Physical enforcers? Why bring theology into it?
That's a critical question, and it speaks directly to resource management. Physical guards cost a lot. They need to be fed, paid, housed, and you have to watch them to make sure they don't abuse their power. They are a significant drain on your limited surplus.
Okay.
The introduction of what we call morally punishing high gods, or MPHGs, is a distinct evolutionary step because it achieves the same result. Social compliance, but at a fraction of the cost.
Ah, the police officer in the sky. It's internalized surveillance.
It's exactly that. MPHGs are deities active in human affairs. They have omniscience, omnipresence, and they enforce moral codes, punishing you not just now, but maybe in the afterlife. This belief system extends observation beyond the limits of human authority.
So if the chief's guards can't see you cheating on your grain taxes,
The omniscient high god can, and the punishment will be severe, universal, and unavoidable.
so the belief system itself is functionally cheat governance. It reduces the costs of policing and conflict resolution by making every individual police themselves.
That is the functional brilliance of it. The sources are clear. The high god concept was a powerful and successful adaptive response that met the specific political and economic demands of a rapidly scaling society. It stabilized the social pyramid when localized trust mechanisms failed. Without it, many of these societies might have just collapsed under the strain of internal conflict.
Okay, so the surplus didn't just create complexity, it created stratification. Once we have artisans, priests, rulers, how did the theology adapt to make these massive inequalities, like we saw in the Varna graves, seem, well, natural and divinely ordained?
The theological framework had to adapt to legitimize these new, rigid power dynamics. We see this manifested through monumental labor. Consider those massive structures. The megaliths, the community longhouses, these required immense labor coordination and central direction.
So coordinating 100 people to move a 50-ton stone showed everyone that the coordinator was skilled and worthy of permanent authority. It was like a job interview.
A very public and very persuasive one. The act of coordinating these massive religious projects reinforced the leadership skills and cemented the authority of the organizers. And then the monuments themselves served a powerful dual purpose. They were ceremonial, sure, but they also visually and ritually institutionalized this new ranking system. They became permanent, physical proof that the leader had the mandate to command hundreds of people.
And as power became more unified on Earth, it had to be unified in the heavens too. A single human authority requires a single divine authority.
That's the cosmological mandate. The consolidation of power culminated in the rise of the king-priest figure. This singular human authority required a corresponding singular supreme divinity, a proto-monotheistic principle from which the monarch's mandate flowed.
Why? Why couldn't the king get his power from a committee of gods?
Because if the king's power is diffused among several competing gods, his own power is weaker, it's negotiable. But if he is the direct representative of the one highest god, his authority is absolute. It's not up for debate.
So the supreme king on Earth requires the supreme god in heaven. It's a direct projection of human stratification onto the divine plane.
It's the ultimate ideological defense mechanism. Mythological narratives were crafted to sustain this. They portrayed the gods themselves as having hierarchies, like the later Greek Olympian gods, that directly justified social stratification among humans. It established a divine precedent for inequality.
And it encouraged people to focus on the next life, not on overthrowing the king in this one.
Precisely. It supported the ruling class by encouraging subordinate groups to internalize the ideology and focus their aspirations elsewhere. The shift to a supreme, universal entity reigning over all is the cosmological ratification of political unification under a single central ruler. It made hierarchy seem eternal and natural.
Here's where it gets really interesting for me. We've established the political need for a high god, but the sources suggest that human observations of the natural world provided the literal cognitive blueprint to even conceive of such a being.
Absolutely. The intellectual capacity to observe and predict the rhythms of the cosmos provided the philosophical, rule-based foundation for these abstract concepts. The new political order found its intellectual template in the stars.
So what fundamentally did sedentary agriculture demand from the sky that nomadic foraging never did?
Precision. Nomadic foraging required a general awareness of seasons, sure. But farming demanded a precise understanding of seasonal changes. Farmers relied critically on predicting solstices, equinoxes, meteorological cycles, the exact day to plant, the exact day to harvest, to maximize their yield and avoid famine.
And this need spurred systematic observation.
Systematic, communal, institutionalized observation. This wasn't just casual stargazing. We see the architectural evidence of this in monumental sites like stone circles, which appear all over, serving as sophisticated tools for measuring these cycles.
And this shift in observation had profound theological consequences. Because what do the sun, moon, and stars do that a local river spirit does not?
They demonstrate regularity, universality, and consistency.
They're predictable.
They're predictable. Polytheistic systems often dealt with capricious deities. A river spirit might be angry. A storm god might be moody. Their actions could be random. They were reflections of unpredictable terrestrial phenomena.
But the celestial movements, they are predictable, eternal, and consistent everywhere you look.
Exactly. This profound cosmic order provided the intellectual foundation for a deity that was abstract, eternal, and transcendent, capable of regulating the entire cosmos based on immutable laws, rather than being attached to a specific spot on the map or being prone to human-like emotions.
This sounds like the birth of philosophical inquiry, all driven by the need for a planting schedule.
It is the genesis of the capacity for abstraction, and so the conceptualization of divinity shifted toward the celestial sphere. This is why the classic supreme being in so many early cultures became the Sky Father.
The Sky Father.
Proto-Indo-European traditions have Dies Pater, Sky Father. The sky is inherently abstract, it's omnipresent, it's formless, yet it's responsible for critical universal phenomena like rain, sun, and cosmic order. This intellectual breakthrough allowed societies to conceive of a cosmic regulator, which perfectly aligned with the supreme, unifying, divine principle they needed. They found the perfect template for their supreme king in the universe itself.
So once they figured out this celestial order and started quantifying the cycles, the knowledge itself became the single most powerful tool for political control.
An incredible concentration of power. This technical knowledge became a potent tool for the elite. The development of standardized lunisolar calendar systems, which we see formalizing in Mesopotamia in the 3rd millennium BCE, was critical not just for farming, but for ordering economic life debt reckoning, contract scheduling, tax payments. It was the foundational technology for an administrative state.
And who was in charge of that technology? The people who could read the heavens.
The specialized interpretation of these complex calendars conferred immense, undeniable authority upon the priestly class. By monopolizing this essential knowledge, the priesthood gained a literal divine mandate. They were the only ones who knew when the rituals had to be performed, when the festivals began, and crucially, when taxes were due.
So their scientific expertise solidified their spiritual power by making them indispensable. If the calendar is wrong, the crops fail, society collapses.
Exactly. Their accurate prediction of these cycles reinforced the idea that they were the necessary intermediaries between the human community and the supreme, ordering sky god. This isn't just a theological claim, it was a technological fact used for political stability. We even see the gravity of calendar control in later traditions, like the conflicts over the calendar among early Jewish sects. This concentration of esoteric scientific knowledge was a primary mechanism for the centralization of ritual power.
Okay, so beyond politics and science, the material culture and these huge shifts in social roles provided the physical and social scaffolding to reinforce this new ideology.
Belief needed structures to be believed in, and social roles needed a cosmic justification.
Let's talk about Göbekli Tepe. It dates back nearly 12,000 years in Turkey, and it's a revolutionary site. Why is it so crucial here? It seems to change the whole narrative.
Göbekli Tepe is crucial precisely because it precedes the widespread adoption of settled agriculture. Its massive, ringed enclosures with huge stone pillars weighing up to 20 tons each required a level of organized labor that small, nomadic groups were previously thought incapable of.
So the argument is that a powerful, central religious commitment was the prerequisite for social organization, rather than the other way around.
That's the profound shift in our understanding. It suggests a powerful ideological commitment was the catalyst for the social organization, rather than agriculture creating a surplus that allowed for building. The monumentality itself suggests a centralized, overarching belief system capable of commanding hundreds of people.
The idea came before the village.
The idea had to come first to build the temple that would serve the village that didn't even exist yet.
Tell us about the iconography of those T-pillars. What do they represent?
They're frequently interpreted as highly stylized, larger-than-life anthropomorphic figures. You can see arms, hands, belts, garments carved into them. They're clearly beings, but they are superhuman.
Not just people.
Not just people. These may represent powerful ancestors, or maybe nascent superhuman deities entities capable of organizing and overseeing the vast communal rituals and the labor. The very existence of these structures, dedicated solely to ritual institutionalized belief. It separated the sacred from the profane and provided the physical setting needed for a formal, administered religion.
It sounds like a powerful cultural feedback loop was established.
A massively reinforcing one. The initial belief drove the construction. That construction reinforced the leadership of the organizers, and once it was built, the sheer, awe-inspiring physical scaffolding validated the authority of those leaders and their divine mandate. It accelerated the whole process of social and religious concentration.
There's another huge cultural shift happening at the same time. The changing relationship between gender and the divine. A shift from female-centric fertility worship to male-centric universal order.
That's one of the most visible cultural mechanisms for centralization. Early Neolithic religion often centered on fertility and life cycles, embodied by the great goddess. She was associated directly with the earth, with procreation. It was a local, earth-based power.
But as societies grew more complex and stratified, the political power consolidated overwhelmingly under male leaders, the big man, the king priest.
And the theology had to shift to match and justify this new political reality. The rise of heavily patriarchal systems, which were needed for clear patrilineal inheritance of property and status, correlated directly with the decline in women's social status and the elevation of male deities to the supreme position.
Why was the localized mother goddess less politically useful than the transcendent sky father?
Because the mother goddess is immanent, she is in the land, she's localized, associated with the cyclical nature of birth, it's difficult for a distant, centralized male ruler to monopolize that.
Right.
The Sky Father, on the other hand, is universal, transcendent, and associated with law, order, and cosmic management, precisely what the new centralized state needed to legitimize its wide reach and hierarchical structure. The localized power of the Mother Goddess was superseded by the universal power of the Sky Father.
The Sky Father becomes the ultimate justification for state power.
He is the perfect supreme deity for it. And this was often codified in creation myths, which commonly feature a separation of the sky, the sacred abstract ordering realm, and the earth, the terrestrial secular realm. The human king was then conceived as the sky god's direct representative on earth, legitimizing political dominance and male control over resources, law, and lineage.
So the replacement of the fertility goddess by an abstract supreme sky god was not a theological accident. It was a definitive cultural ratification of political patriarchy and centralization.
It established the divine blueprint for monarchy and the subjugation of local authority.
Okay, so let's put this all together. What does this all mean? The rise of the high god, the supreme ordering, moralizing deity. It wasn't a sudden theological event. It was a strategic, complex, and necessary multi-pronged effort required to keep massive societies from collapsing under their own weight. It was an adaptive strategy.
We can see how the three causal pillars converged. The emergence of centralized divinity was successful because it managed to satisfy three simultaneous and pressing societal demands.
Okay, let's review them. Let's start with the need for human management.
That's the political demand. The scalar stress from population growth drove the absolute need for universal, non-kin moral enforcement. This resulted directly in the emergence of those morally punishing high gods, which solved the collective action problem by internalizing surveillance.
And it legitimized the new leaders.
It led to the consolidation of authority in a single king-priest figure, giving a divine mandate to a human chief executive mirroring a supreme god.
Okay, second, the cognitive template from the environment itself.
The scientific blueprint. The demands of farming forced systematic observational astronomy, which provided the intellectual template of universal, ordered celestial cycles. This resulted in the abstraction of divinity, the belief in a transcendent sky god or cosmic regulator. And the monopolization of timekeeping then ensured the institutionalization of religious life under the control of the priesthood.
And finally, the cultural structures that locked it all into place.
The cultural mechanism. Monumental architecture like Göbekli Tepe provided the physical institutionalization of ideology, reinforcing cult leadership. At the same time, the shift to patriarchy was theologically ratified by the displacement of the Earth Mother Goddess by the Universal Sky Father, establishing the divine basis for monarchy and male state power.
The result wasn't strict monotheism yet, but it was henotheism, one ultimate, supreme, moralizing entity overseeing everything.
And that template is the enduring legacy. This transformation established the core theological structure that subsequent Iron Age civilizations, including early Yabism and others, utilized and refined. The Neolithic adaptive shift was the critical moment religion became a centralized, essential, and politically charged technology for managing and accelerating the growth of complex human civilization. It was an ideological invention to prevent the chaos of scale.
So we've seen how the fundamental need to coordinate massive construction projects, manage shared resources, and justify staggering social inequality ultimately necessitated the invention of a higher moral policeman, a cosmic chief executive. The challenge of agriculture didn't just give us villages, it gave us gods.
And that raises an important question for you, the listener, as you navigate our own world of scaling challenges and complex global coordination. If the very concept of a supreme ordering deity arose primarily as an institutional necessity to solve specific problems of cooperation and scale in rapidly expanding unequal societies, does that deep, functional, adaptive origin still fundamentally shape how we perceive, organize, and practice religion in our hyper-complex, globalized society today? Is the high god still performing its original job of ensuring collective action and validating hierarchy, or have its functions evolved away from its Neolithic mandate? Something to think about until the next deep dive.